Right, class, good day. Today I'm going to discuss to you two chapters. No, we will have a marathon discussion on this because these chapters are relatively short, and we can actually manage to finish this within within hour and a half. So I'm sending this to you in the hope that you can read this ahead of time before discussion nato next week. So let me tackle the first chapter, which is chapter 10, strategy to keep profits from eroding. No, in these chapters we have two objectives: uh, to help formulate, or to help formulate the method, long run method of slowing down possible profit erosion, because we know that profit through competition will be eroded in the future. But how do you manage to fortify your firm in order to maintain your profitability? So we help formulate long run method of increasing profit, or avoiding profit erosion in the future. Second, help build your company, fortify, strengthen the company against profit erosion, and therefore sustain profitability in the long run. Now, there are two ways of gaining competitive advantage. Number one, of course, this one is letter A. There is delivery, deliver the same product at the same price. Okay? Now, the big question here is, how do you stay competitive by offering the same price of the same product, right? And the only way you can do this is actually reducing the cost of production. Okay, and there are different ways of reducing cost of production. Primarily, it starts from reducing your cost of materials, because cost of materials actually uh, covers probably, dako-dako nga volume sa atong cost sa production, cost of inputs of materials. And possibly we can reduce this cost by inviting as many price quotation as possible from various companies. Price quotation, so we call it price canvassing. Okay, and then second, possibly if we are able to secure, a long-term contract, we will sign a long-term contract with supplier, no or suppliers plural in the supply chain. Okay, we can establish a long-term contract. This is because having a long-term contract will give you many advantages. For example, if you have a long-term commitment with the supplier, possibly it will reduce your cost, and plus other advantages along that line. And possibly you can offer a cash payment, because if you pay cash, you can actually take advantage of discounts. Another is possibly you reduce the cost of inventory, because inventory, especially the unsold stocks, will give you will uh, will give you additional cost, additional cost of carrying and ordering cost. Oftentimes inventory are also being taxed, not to mention leaving aside other costs, such as cost of cost of obsolescence, pilferage, etc. And possibly one way of reducing cost, is to increase your workers' efficiency. If your worker is efficient in handling material, or your workers are efficient in maintaining cost, thereby reduce your cost of material. Okay. Another is this is letter B. There are only two actually you can actually do. No, delivery of superior products of similar cost. Here the problem is how to build an efficient and effective production method. Okay, this is the production side. What you can do probably is you have to analyze, evaluate the production system. Example, you have to analyze the design of your plant, no, plant layout, whether or not your plant layout is cost reducing or maybe cost increasing. Or also you have to consider the processing and the assembly equipment, whether or not they are cost reducing and cost increasing. Okay, all of this will give you an idea and assess the effectiveness, no, the effectiveness, including the benefits of your production system in terms of input output relationship. Okay, so if we summarize everything here, it boils down to one point. One is the strategy in developing a method of allocating the value to your stakeholders. Remember, the company has at least three stakeholders. First, your consumer. This is the principal stakeholder. All right, your consumer. Your consumer should be given sufficient amount of consumer surplus. Otherwise, the amount that they pay to your product may be insufficient, no, to the expected consumer surplus. And also you have to consider the company, your company's perspective. Your company also takes into account how much profit it is going to earn, right? And also the supplier in the supply chain. How much is the cost of raw material? So you see the column here. You can remove, or you can actually change it. You can either increase, let's say here you can increase the consumer surplus, thereby reducing the amount of your firm's profit. All right, or maybe through various means. Okay, through various means you can actually reduce the cost of your supplier, no, cost of your inputs or raw materials. Or maybe you can decrease the amount of consumer surplus, thereby increasing the amount of your firm's profit. So these are the three allocative methods of slicing out the value to which this can be shared along the stakeholders. All right. Now in your book, there also mentioned there that there are sources of economic profit, no, from the industry's point of view. Okay, the sources point of view. When you say economic profit, we are actually uh, this refers to the net, okay, the net earnings derived from total revenue minus average total cost. We are not mentioning here, no, leaving aside the total revenue minus marginal cost, because marginal cost, if your total revenue is equal to your total marginal cost, there is no economic profit. So take note that economic profit is always based on total cost. All right, so you will have the following sources. One, low buyer power, no, low buyer power. Example of low buyer power can be had when your consumer, no, when your buyers are not sensitive to prices, no. Demand elasticity is less than 1 or lower, no, lower, have low sensitivity of demand, right? All right, they are not sensitive to prices, so relatively you can gain of lower buyer power. Another is absence of substitutes, no. If there are no substitutes of your product, then the consumer will have no choice but to buy your product, and that means they have lower power, no. Or possibly your product is a specialized product where there is no close substitutes, all right? Or no, there is no close substitute. It's specialized. And you can also have lower buyer power depending on whether your consumers are uneducated, no, uneducated. They have no idea of your production system. For example, they have no idea of the competitiveness of the market, right? Another is low supplier power, no? This can be had when we have low supply concentration, no? We have less competition because suppliers are less concentrated. And possibly, there is high consumer, no, elasticity or sensitivity to price. That is another, no, another example that could reduce supplier power. And probably another example is that there is no threat of forward integration, etc. Forward integration is when products of your inputs, no, input products are produced in a vertically sequenced production method, no. Sometimes they call it vertical integration. For example, one semi-finished raw material is passed on to another firm to further the process, no, to further the material, and so on and so forth. Another is low rate of entry, no. Low rate of entry means there is high barriers of entry of would-be potential entrepreneurs, right? And you also have low levels of rivalry, no? Okay? Low entry and low levels of rivalry makes your firm, makes your company attractive, no? Attractive because there is less entry. At the same time, it makes your company comfortable in terms of generating profit, no? It's easy to generate profit when there is very low rivalry, no, among competition. Probably this is because of product differentiation. Your product is different from the other products. Another is low threats of substitutes. If there are no substitutes, if there are substitutes but they do not serve, no, they do not serve threat. Therefore, your brand can still have greater market, no, can still have greater market. Okay. All right. So these are sources of economic profit from the standpoint of uh, the industry as a whole. And then there are also sources of profits from the resource point of view, no? From the resource point of view. Okay. Resource that flows from firms' unique historical conditions will be difficult for competitors to match. For example, no, ikaw ang una sa industriya, ikaw ang dunay, ikaw ang una naka-exploit or nakatap sa resources, then there is strong tendency that you will block the entry of new competitor. because you have a unique position there, being the first to exploit the resources. Take note that resources are exhaustible. No, most resources are exhaustible, or maybe some resources are renewable, but then because you are ahead of time, okay, viewed in the context of other competitors, you will have a greater advantage over them. Okay. And then another is when the link between resources and advantage is unclear, no? This is because competitors will have very hard time to recreate the resources. Okay? For example, there is a resource, for example, no? Your company is using a particular resource. And because of your organizational culture, or probably your organization, your production system is such that nobody can copy, then you will have an advantage. Not mainly because of the resource per se, but because of your advantage, no, in terms of the techniques in production. Okay. Another is resources are socially complex, no. There are resources that require social organization. For example, planting of rice, for example, no, planting of rice, for example, actually is a agricultural undertaking that requires cooperation among farmers, no, things like that, no. There are resources that require further human development, human resource development. And if that is very difficult, then it is difficult for new entrant company to imitate or to match. All right. So generally, we can summarize that this chapter, no, chapter 10, talks about three basic strategy. What are these three basic strategies? Either what? You can increase the price or reduce the cost of production, no? Cost reduction, and then differentiate the product or product differentiation, and of course reduce the degree of competition, no. You can do a reduction of competition. How? By making products different from the others. In other words, just like in a monopolistic market where your product is unique or your product cannot be copied because of government regulations such as patent, copyright, or trademark. So you can also take advantage of government regulations. All right. So these are the three, no. These are the three basic strategies in preventing or avoiding erosion of profits in the long run. Now, let's proceed to chapter 12. No? Chapter 12 talks about exchange rate, trade, and bubbles. I do not know why the author used this, but because modern companies are actually engaged in export and import, no? Engaged in an international trade. By the way, let me ask you, why do countries engage in trade? According to famous author, economist, uh, in the person of Thomas Malthus. Thomas Malthus said that, Thomas Malthus, David Ricardo rather, sorry, in the person of David Ricardo. According to him, this is theory, no? Theoretical. In 1700, no? 1700. According to David Ricardo, countries trade because of comparative advantage. Countries trade because of comparative advantage. And what is comparative advantage? Comparative advantage is that tendency, no? He did not generalize this, no? This is not a sweeping statement. To David Ricardo mentioned about the tendency for countries to trade based on cost of production, no? Comparative advantage. Comparative advantage means the tendency, no? The tendency for a country to export goods, no? The tendency of a country to export goods that are cheap to produce at home. Cheap to produce at home, no? Meaning it is cheap to produce locally. And import goods that are expensive, no? Import goods that are expensive to produce, locally, no? All right, that is a tendency. Why tendency? Because in actual world, comparatives is very difficult to prove. It's very difficult to find out. I do not know if there is an existing study of comparative advantage. If there is a study, then it is most probably different from what David Ricardo mentioned about. No, mentioned about. I will give you a mathematical example, no? Mathematical example of comparative advantage. Let's say there are two countries. Let's say country X, and then you have country Y, no? Country Y. Let us suppose there are only two countries trading two products. Let's say product A and product B. Alright? Alright. And then country X, let's say, can produce, let's say, per man hour, no? Per man hour, let's say, per hour, using man as the main production input. Let's say, country X can produce 6 units of product A, while and can produce 2 units, let's say, 4 units, let's say, 4 units of product B, right? On the other hand, country Y can produce, let's say, 4 units of product A and 3 units of product B. Okay? You notice that why would country X trade with country Y when it has the absolute advantage over country Y, because it can produce more units of both products compared to Y. But then David Ricardo, no, the basis of trade is comparative advantage. Ba? Comparative advantage is not based on absolute advantage. So let us say comparative advantage of X and comparative advantage of Y, no? So if you try to compute the advantage of X of product A, you will have 6 divided by 4. You will have 6 divided by 4 is how much? 6 divided by 4 is how much, baby? 6 divided by 4 is 1.666. So 6 divided by 4. 6 divided by 4 is 1.5. Yeah. Oh, 1.5? Yeah, 1.5. Which means that it takes 1 unit of, okay? 6 divided by 4, it takes 1 unit of country Y, okay, to produce 1.5 units of product A in country X. So you will have a comparative advantage here of country X, which is how much? 1.5, right? Here, you will have 4 over 3. How much? 4 divided by 3. That is 1.33. This is the comparative advantage of, no? Comparative advantage of X. Right? Okay, now, what about Y? Y can produce 4 divided by 6 is how much? 4 divided by 6 is how much? That is 0.666 ba? 0.666. Right, 0.666. And then you have 4 divided by 3 is 1.333. No, 1.333. Here, you will notice that it is cheaper for country Y to produce, no? To produce product A, but it is expensive to produce product B. Therefore, therefore what? Therefore, the tendency is for country Y to export product A to country X and import product B from country X. On the other hand, it is therefore the possibility, strong possibility that country X will have to import product A from country Y and export goods. No? Export goods. Product A. Product it will cost how much ba? Yeah, this is more expensive. No? This is more expensive. 1.3. So, kani siya, morning ang again, morning i-import sa country X. Okay, mo po niyang i-export nga produkto because it is cheaper. Right? So, that is what we call comparative advantage. Okay, so although that is not being discussed in the book, but just to give you an idea, no. And in this chapter, there are two basic questions you are supposed to answer. How are exchange rates, foreign exchange rates determined? Right? Number two, how the changes in exchange rates affect firms and consumers. Right? Now, exchange rates are actually determined by demand and supply. You all know that, no? It's determined by, it's very elementary, no? It's determined by demand and supply. But demand and supply actually is governed by different set of factors, no? Demand and supply will have to depend on various factors. Number one is inflation rate, no? If in a country prices are higher, therefore the value of currency domestically and foreign will go lower. And this will make the product domestic products less attractive, either domestic and foreign, no? Foreign market. If the inflation could have been lower, okay, then domestic, no, then could have been lower, then domestic currency and foreign currency will have greater, no, purchasing power because of lower inflation rate. Another is interest rate. Higher interest rates attracts foreign capital. Remember, if foreign investors learn from one country that interest rate is higher, they would move their portfolios, no? Or they would probably undertake foreign direct investments. Okay? In the process, with the influx of capital into the country, this will cause exchange rate to rise again. No? This will cause exchange rates to rise. In other words, there is a inverse, ba? Inverse. There is an inverse. No? There is a direct proportion between interest rate and exchange rate. Higher interest rates, there will be also expected increase in exchange rates. And then another is in the trade accounts. Okay, there is what we call current account, no? Current account, this in what we call balance of payments figures, no? In the balance of payments figures, there is a portion there which we call current account. If the current account, these are amount of goods and services that are bought and sold from other countries or sold to another country. Okay? Kung natay deficit sa current account, that means our country is spending more on foreign products than we are earning. So we are importing more than we are exporting. All right? And if we have more import, that means our currency will devaluate, no? Our peso become weaker and weaker because we are importing more than we are exporting. All right? If on the other hand, if we have a surplus of current account, then our country will be spending less on foreign products. Therefore, our peso, or no, our currency, which is peso, will have greater value over the US dollar. All right. And then terms of trade is also one factor. No? Terms of trade is simply the ratio of export and import prices, right? If the price of exports rise faster than our import prices, then there is favorable forms of trade. Why? Favorable terms of trade because our export prices are higher compared sa atong import. That means we will have a positive or favorable balance of payments. Okay, contrast, if we have lower export prices compared to our import, then we will have in unfavorable balance of payments or unfavorable terms of trade. Take note that terms of trade is different from balance of payments. Balance of payments is different, right? Balance of payments includes all accounts, the current account, the capital account, no? All right. Okay, now, what is the effect of uh, fluctuation of exchange rate? There are two effects. Either it will cause currency devaluation or it will cause currency appreciation. Okay? What is currency devaluation? Okay? Currency devaluation is, let's say, we have more dollar supply in the country. That means our peso becomes stronger, no? Our peso become, oh no. Currency devaluation means our peso becomes weaker, meaning our domestic products, no, our domestic suppliers will be happy because they will have ready, no, market for their products from foreign countries, and foreign buyers will also be will also enjoy, no, the benefit of currency devaluation because of lower prices. However, it hurts the domestic consumer because the domestic consumers will compete with foreign consumers. At the same time, this will also discourage foreign suppliers because with lower prices of products, suppliers would also be discouraged to supply because of lower prices, right? So you will have currency devaluation. On the other hand, we have currency depreciation. Currency depreciation is when, let's say, when peso, when $1 commands more and more peso, no? Okay. Usually, what happens is when we have more demand for dollars than supply, so our demand for dollar exceeds supply. What happens? We have currency appreciation, no? This happens usually when our import is faster or bigger, larger than our export. So we will be at the mercy of dollar because we are more import-oriented country, right? So it's the opposite that will happen. domestic suppliers and foreign consumers under currency appreciation will be happy, no? No, will be sad. They will be sad because of higher prices, Domestic suppliers will be curtailed to export because foreign consumers, on the other hand, will stop buying the products. But our domestic consumers will be happy because by comparison, consumers now can buy our domestic products, and this will also encourage foreign suppliers to supply us with foreign products because of currency depreciation, no? Dollar can command more and more peso. Okay? Another topic that is included in chapter 11, chapter 12, chapter 11, masiro ni, no? Chapter 11, I guess. Chapter 11. Alright? Is bubbles, no? What is bubble? Bubble, or bubbles in plural, is the sudden rise in the price of assets, which is generally followed by decline or a contraction of economic activity. Okay? Now, one characteristic of bubble is that prices of assets rises above their intrinsic value because people change in their behavior, especially investors. No, there is a change in investors' expectation about the future. Okay, all right, and sometimes this involve about large trading volumes. No, kung tanaw nimo sa stock exchange, makita nimo ang graph, no? Ang makita nimo barometer nga gasaka ang trading volume. One characteristic of rise in the trading volume is also the rise in prices. Now, what happens if the price reach to a height that it will create negative expectation? That is where bubbles burst. When bubbles burst, that is the period of decline and contraction, right? Bula ba? Bubbles means bula. Gabula-bula pero wa day sulod. Ang resulta, naguba ang ekonomiya, di ba? So we need to avoid bubbles, no? We need to avoid bubbles because it will encourage a change of investment channels. For example, no, there is what happened on Hemans, no, Hemans stocks. Nagsaka kayo ang precious mga stocks because of housing, especially younger people like you who now settle for marriage life. Nahitabo, palit silang balay. So everybody follow. Ang nahitabo, prices goes up beyond, no? Beyond the intrinsic value of housing. A time is reached when the price is too high that it creates pessimism, no? People look at housing as something very bad. So they suddenly shift. Instead of buying house, they opted to rent, no? Rental. Instead of buying. So there is a sudden rise in the prices of assets, then followed by decline and contraction. Right? So, how do we determine bubbles? How are bubbles determined? Common experience suggests nga tanaw nato ang stock exchange, no? Fluctuation sa prices sa stock exchange, and then compare them to earnings and profits, corporate profits and earnings. Kung dako kayo ang pagsaka sa prices, okay? Okay, mahitabo nga it rises faster than earnings and profit of corporation because for example, no, gipalit sa corporate, nagpalit kag stock sa corporation, let's say 5 pesos, and then the corporation can actually generate only 3 pesos. In that case, there is a difference, negative, no, there is negative profit of 2 pesos, and this will not continue. Therefore, the rise in the prices of stocks will have to stop because profit earnings is lower than the stock prices. The same thing with prices of houses relative to rental. All right. Then another topic that is mentioned also in this chapter, no, chapter 12, is purchasing power. No? Purchasing power parity or PPP. What is that? Sa mo na ang purchasing power parity? Uh, Actually, comparison purchasing power parity is actually the cost of goods in currency of one country divided by the cost of goods of currency in another country. For example, $1 against the peso. No? So here, how much ba is dollar? Siguro 50 man siguro atong dolyaris. So 50 pesos against $1. So if you have, dili kay ko sinati no, pila ka raw atong exchange rate, but if we have, for instance, if we have $1 against 5 peso, that means that we need we need to obtain 50 pesos in order to buy 1 unit of product in the United States worth $1, right? On the other hand, the Americans can buy 50 pesos worth of Filipino goods. Okay? So that is actually purchasing power parity, no? The formula is quite simple, no? You simply divide, okay? Cost of goods, cost of good X, let's say good X. Tanta lang produkto. Good X in currency in one country. In currency in one country. In a country, for example, divided by cost of goods of X, the same product, no? The same product in currency of another country. Of another country. So this is divided another country. So this is divide. So the ratio will give us the purchasing power parity. For international comparison, for example, you compare the purchasing power of peso against the Malaysian ringgit, or compare Philippine peso against Indonesian rupiah or Thailand baht, we normally use US dollar. So in other words, purchasing power parity for comparison, international comparison, we use US dollar as basis, no? Why? Well, muna na siya, no? That is the customary, no, naanda na nato. Well, besides that, no, besides that, it happens that dollar was used as a medium of payment. Mga sa international transaction ba? Ato bagong gigamit ang dollar as a medium of payment internationally. And besides that, doon na po historical na nga precedence. One historical precedence is that there was a time when there was so much gold in United States, no? Doon ay gitawag nimo gold rush. Gitawag na gold rush. At that time, at that time naggamit pa to og kanang metal, no? Nagamit pa tag metal as basis for as medium of exchange, na we use gold standard and silver standard as a medium of exchange. Karon fiat money naman ta, fiat money. I do not know kung ibalik pa ba na karon ang gold standard, pero wala naman, fiat money naman ta. Meaning our money is legal tender, no? Legal tender. So hamay maayo para sa ako, mas okay galin ning gold, no? Kay ang gold manggod kay marag dili kay subject sa fluctuation, pero kining fiat money which is based on legal, no? Legal tender, which is more legal can be subject to various factors that may cause the fluctuation of purchasing power parity to fluctuate more volatile, no? Volatile nga fluctuation tungod sa legal tender malanggod siya, di siya gabasihan sa gold nga. Gold is gold, remember. It's a commodity at the same time money. It's money at the same time a commodity. So, this is more stable. Many economists gani nag-believe nga kung ibalik ang gold standard, then ang world currency will have more stable. Malikayan nato ng mga gitawag mo mga bubbles. Right? So, that's it guys. So, alright. So, that is the topics discussed for our ano. Now, take note in chapter each chapter 10, you answer the multiple test item, no? Also in chapter 11, okay, for our next meeting. Okay, right, that's it guys.